Hi, I'm Terie. I donated a kidney to a stranger at the time about 5 years ago. 7 years ago, I began watching my brother-in-law, my husband's brother, live life with kidney failure. He was on dialysis regularly, and it was hard to see the quality of his life decline and see how hard that was for he and his wife. And I tested and was able to be a match for him, which was great. And May 31st, 6 years ago, he passed away before the transplant could happen. I didn't know until my brother-in-law went through this health crisis what kidney failure, how kidney failure impacted life. And I was surprised to see how weakened he had become and how difficult it was for him, who he was such an independent, strong man. And this was very difficult for him. And the other thing that really surprised me was that dialysis isn't necessarily super safe, because that's actually where my brother-in-law passed away. He was doing dialysis when it happened. I was very comfortable with the idea of donating a kidney to my brother-in-law. And in response to the shock of losing him, I very shortly began thinking that in my mind, the kidney that I was going to give to him was really not my kidney anymore. It had kind of ceased being that as soon as I decided that that was what I wanted to do. And so I began pursuing opportunities or options for donation to somebody that I didn't know. It felt like a good way to honor my brother-in-law, and also a great way to help somebody who needed it. When I started to research living kidney donation, what surprised me was how thoroughly they spent talking to me and investigating what my motives were, and then making sure that the donor has an advocate that is completely separate from the recipient. And so up until the very minute before I went into surgery, I was told very seriously by my advocate that I absolutely would be able to choose not to do this. And that was completely within my right, and it was okay. And it was her job to communicate that to the potential recipient. So I was surprised at how seriously they took that. My family and my friends were supportive of this decision, but they were also worried. I know my sister in particular was really worried, and I had some friends who were pretty seriously worried just about my well-being, and that I would be healthy after the transplant. I had very few worries. I don't know whether that was realistic or unrealistic, but I really wasn't worried. And I kept telling the people who loved me that I felt very strongly that this was something that I was supposed to do, and that I felt as if it would honor my brother-in-law, the memory of my brother-in-law. I didn't have really a lot of fears going into this. I did have a lot of questions. I had questions about whether my diet would need to change, what kinds of restrictions I would have in terms of activity or medications that I could or couldn't take. I don't know if I would qualify those as fears as much as I just spent a lot of time reading about it and asking questions about it. The The advocate at the hospital where I had the transplant done was very accessible and answered lots of questions. I also did lots of reading online. I met a couple of people by chance or not in my own life who had been donors, and so I was able to talk to them about their experiences. And so I felt like I went in with eyes wide open to this whole experience. I would say the greatest sources of information about donation were to be found online. I participated in forums. I read research, and I read about different hospitals across the country who specialized in these surgeries. I actually, for my brother-in-law, had started at one hospital with the process, and ended up, after he passed away, completing the donation at a different hospital. And both hospitals were sources of good information as well. I did have some financial questions. Of course, whether my medical costs would be covered, and whether I ended up having to stay close by the hospital, which was not near my home, for about a week after the surgery. So I wondered whether the cost of that stay might be covered. And I was fortunate that I had time at work to take off, so my work wasn't impacted. My medical costs were fully covered. The cost of, for example, the gas to get there and the housing that I had to stay in was not covered, but I was able to write off those costs for income tax purposes, so that was useful. I was amazingly fortunate to have a fantastic support network. My husband was with me during the surgery and thereafter, and my adult children were very available to me. My friends were super available. My sister was very present, and I had lots of well wishes and felt very loved and nurtured during that time. I was fortunate not to have to make too many lifestyle changes when I donated my kidney, like diet or activity or weight loss. So that was good. But something that I did do when I started was I had a little picture of my brother-in-law, and I put the words "okay" on that picture, and I just kept that. I kept it in my wallet, in my car, on the refrigerator. OK standard for Operation Kidney, and I just used that to kind of as an impetus to eat healthy and just be aware of my activity level, my exercising, and that kind of thing. That really helped me to stay on track, because I wanted to be able to give a kidney that was healthy. I also started trying to train myself to not use NSAID medication like Advil and naproxen, because you're not really supposed to do that when you only have one kidney. So I thought it was a good idea to just start then. So that was kind of my one thing that I changed as a result of knowing that I was going to be donating a kidney. I'm not sure how long the surgery took. Not very long. I remember being there, needing to be there early in the morning, and I finished in the morning. I was released to go to my room, and it was still in the late morning, I think. I was in the hospital for 4 days, I think. And then I needed to stay nearby in the hospital because I lived out of town. So I needed to stay there for another, I think, week or maybe 8 days. So not too bad. And I know that other hospitals don't even require that, the staying nearby. So, and I know other people who've donated kidneys who were out in less time than I was. I'm actually maybe was there for a little bit longer. I think I had kind of a reaction to the pain medication that kind of slowed me up a little bit, but it really wasn't bad. And I was ready to go. A tip about the hospital stay. Take advantage of the care that others give to you. I was very well taken care of. And if you have discomfort, know that it's not going to last forever. I remember being uncomfortable in my abdominal and chest area because of the gas that they have to expand your cavity with so that they can take the kidney. And that has to dissipate, and that was a little bit uncomfortable. And then I'm kind of sensitive to pain medication, so that was a little bit hard. But other than that, you know, it was a lot easier than a lot of people have for their reasons of being in a hospital. The absolute best moment after my surgery was finding out that my recipient was, in the words of my husband, peeing like a racehorse. It just, and that's good news for people who have kidney failure. So there's no doubt that was the best thing ever to hear. I think I was back to my normal self about 6 weeks after the surgery. I think it would have been shorter, but I overdid it about 2 weeks after the surgery. I participated in a walkathon, and I probably should have not quite done something like that right then. But I would say 6 weeks, and I felt good. I don't remember very much about what the recovery was like at home. I think it went pretty smoothly. I remember my back was sore in the early days, and after I overdid it when I did that walk, that it was really, really tired and painful in that way. And I wasn't supposed to lift things. I remember that. My health has not changed at all in any kind of negative way since I donated a kidney. It's been great. I haven't felt any different than I did prior to that time. I definitely became aware of my own good fortune in having good health during this time, because just the idea that how this impacts somebody else's quality of life, what they can and can't do, how they feel, was very sobering for me. And when I eventually, a year later, met the recipient of my kidney, and he has since told me about his life prior to that, I realized just how really, really sick people are who are in kidney failure. And that was a real awakening for me. When I share my story, I'm often asked whether I have any regrets, whether my health is good, whether I know the person who received my kidney. I do. I consider him as close as a brother. And I'm actually a bit surprised as to how interested they are in the whole story, because it feels like, for me, a less substantial chapter of my life than I understand it to be for the person who received a healthy kidney. Maybe something that surprised me the most was finding out how many people are in kidney failure and how many people need a kidney transplant. And that really motivates me to talk about this experience. I'm not the kind of person that really likes to talk about about myself so much, but this is something that I feel like should be kind of talked about, so that if there's anybody who is considering this, that they would consider moving forward, because there are many people who need this. This whole experience has been tinged with a great deal of sadness and with joy, because of course we lost my brother-in-law, and so that's never going to be okay. But I'm very thankful for a way to have honored him, and extremely thankful that I got to meet the recipient of my kidney. And just a little less than a month ago, I received a phone call and a card from him, just telling me how grateful he was to still be being super active with my 5-year-old kidney inside of him. And so that's absolutely the best part, is knowing that something that impacted me very little is impacting somebody else in such a substantial way. The best advice I could give someone else who's thinking about being a living donor is no regrets here, no regrets. But I would say educate yourself. I would say take advantage of the really great departments that these transplant hospitals have, in terms of the resources that they have, the folks that they have working for them, and ask whether or not they give you contact information for people who've gone through it. I have been contacted by people who are considering donating, because I've given my hospital the permission to give the potential donors my contact information, and I'm always super happy to talk to them. So I would say talk to people, read up, and then go forward and know that you're giving life to somebody else, and we don't have opportunities to do that very often in this life.